You're driving home after spending the evening with people you genuinely like. Nothing went wrong. No arguments, no awkward moments. Everyone laughed, the food was good, and by every normal standard, it was a pleasant night. So why do you feel so exhausted? Not physically, mentally. It's as if your brain has been running in the background for hours, and only now in the quiet of your car do you finally notice how tired it really is. By the time you get home, everyone else has probably forgotten the conversation. You haven't. One sentence keeps replaying in your mind, not because it was dramatic, because something about it didn't feel complete. You wonder what they really meant, whether they were hiding something, whether you should have answered differently. You tell yourself to stop thinking about it, but your mind doesn't seem interested in stopping. Moments like these slowly convince you that something must be different about you. Other people seem able to move through life without carrying every conversation home. They don't spend hours replaying tiny details. They don't question everything they hear. Meanwhile, you've spent years wondering whether you're simply an overthinker, or worse, whether something about you is fundamentally wrong. But what if you've been asking the wrong question? What if the real question isn't, why do I think so much? But instead, why does my mind notice things that other people seem to miss? Because modern psychology suggests that these are two very different questions. Researchers have spent decades discovering that people don't all process information the same way. Some minds are naturally fast, some are practical, some focus on action. Others instinctively search beneath the surface. Instead of collecting facts, they search for meaning. Minds are wired. Imagine sitting in a meeting. Everyone hears the same presentation. But while someone else is listening to the words, your attention drifts somewhere else. You notice the hesitation before the manager answers a question, the coworker who smiles every time someone looks at them, but stops smiling the moment they look away, the silence that appears just before someone changes the subject. None of these details seem important, yet somehow your brain collects them anyway. That's why social situations can leave you feeling strangely drained, not because you dislike people, not because you're shy, but because your attention has been processing hundreds of small signals that most people never consciously notice. By the time everyone else leaves feeling entertained, your mind feels like it's just finished solving a puzzle nobody knew existed. This also explains something you've probably struggled to put into words. You enjoy people, but you also need distance from them. Not forever, just long enough to hear your own thoughts again. For you, being alone isn't the opposite of connection. Sometimes, it's the only place where your nervous system finally becomes quiet. For a long time, experiences like these were dismissed as simple overthinking. But in the early 1980s, psychologists began noticing a pattern. Some people weren't thinking more because they lacked self-control. They were thinking more because their brains genuinely enjoyed understanding complex ideas. And that discovery would eventually change the way psychologists looked at curiosity itself. Psychologists John Cacioppo and Richard Petty introduced a concept called need for cognition. Their research suggested that some people naturally find deep thinking rewarding, not because they want life to be difficult, but because their brains experience genuine satisfaction from understanding how things work. For these people, asking why isn't a habit. It's almost impossible not to. Think about the last time someone told you you're thinking too much. Maybe they were trying to help. Maybe they genuinely believed you would be happier if you could simply let things go.
But letting go has never been that simple for you, because your mind doesn't stop at answers. It naturally looks for what created them. Every conclusion feels like the beginning of another question. That's why two people can read the same book and walk away with completely different experiences. One remembers the story, the other keeps thinking about what the story says about people. One enjoys the conversation, the other wonders what nobody was willing to say out loud. It's not that you're searching for hidden meaning in everything. Your brain simply struggles to stay on the surface.
Psychologist Elaine Aron noticed something similar while studying highly sensitive individuals. She found that some people don't just react more strongly to the world, they actually process information more deeply before responding. Later neuroscience research supported this idea, showing greater activity in brain regions linked to awareness, empathy, and reflection. In other words, some people aren't feeling too much, they're processing more. That sounds like a gift. Sometimes it is. You notice when someone needs support before they ask for it. You recognize tension before an argument begins. You sense when a smile is covering disappointment. People often tell you, "I don't know why, but talking to you feels easy." What they don't realize is how much invisible work your mind has already done before they ever finish speaking. But every strength asks for something in return. When your attention naturally absorbs emotions, patterns, and subtle changes, your nervous system rarely gets a break. A crowded restaurant isn't just loud, it's dozens of conversations competing for your attention. A family gathering isn't just social, it's a room full of emotional signals your brain quietly keeps track of. No wonder you sometimes leave feeling exhausted while everyone else seems ready for another hour. For years, you may have compared yourself to those people. You wondered why they seemed so relaxed, so confident, so certain. But you were comparing your internal experience to someone else's outward behavior. Those two things have never been equal. Eventually, another question begins to appear. If your mind is constantly searching for meaning, what happens when the life you're living no longer feels meaningful? This is where another psychological theory offers an important clue. Researchers Edward Deci and Richard Ryan discovered that lasting motivation doesn't come only from rewards or success. It grows when our actions feel connected to our own values. For some people, that difference isn't very noticeable. For others, it changes everything. If a job feels empty, they lose energy, no matter how good the salary is. If a relationship lacks honesty, affection alone isn't enough. If success requires pretending to be someone they're not, achievement starts feeling strangely hollow. Maybe that's why you've never been satisfied with doing something simply because everyone else was doing it. Your mind keeps asking a quieter question. Is this actually meaningful? Not, will people admire me? Not, will this make me look successful? But, can I honestly see myself living this way? That question has probably guided more of your life than you realize. And perhaps that's also why you've often felt as though you're standing just outside the crowd. Not because you wanted to be different, but because your mind has always been looking for something that can't be measured by popularity, achievement, or approval. Something deeper, something real. The strange part is, that search isn't a weakness. It may actually be pointing you toward the very thing you've been trying to understand about yourself all along. Most people spend their lives trying to fit into the world around them. Maybe you've spent yours trying to understand it. Those aren't the same journey. One asks, how can I belong? The other quietly asks, how can I be honest about who I am? For a long time, you may have believed those two questions had the same answer.
they don't. Without realizing it, you learn to make yourself easier for other people. You laughed before you were ready. You kept your deeper thoughts to yourself. You nodded even when something didn't feel right. Not because you wanted to pretend, because every time you showed the more reflective side of yourself, someone called you too sensitive, too serious, or too complicated. Eventually, you stopped sharing that part altogether. The strange thing about wearing a mask isn't that other people believe it. It's that eventually, you do too. You begin to wonder whether the quieter version of yourself is a flaw, whether your need for solitude is unhealthy, whether your curiosity is excessive, whether you're making life harder than it needs to be. But perhaps you've never been carrying a flaw. Perhaps you've been carrying a misunderstanding. Carl Jung believed that one of the greatest challenges of adulthood wasn't becoming more successful, it was becoming more yourself. He called this process individuation, not creating a new identity, removing the identities that never truly belong to you, the versions of yourself built to earn approval, to avoid rejection, to make other people comfortable. That process isn't exciting. It's often uncomfortable, because every step toward authenticity asks you to leave behind a version of yourself that once helped you survive. And maybe that's why you've never felt completely at home in places where everyone else seemed perfectly comfortable, not because you were in the wrong room, but because you were trying to become the wrong person. Imagine spending years believing your greatest strength was actually your biggest weakness, believing your sensitivity was fragility, your curiosity was overthinking, your quietness was social failure. Now imagine discovering that these qualities weren't signs that something was wrong with you, they were simply signs that your mind experiences the world differently. That realization doesn't change who you are, it changes how you interpret your entire life. Psychology doesn't suggest that people like you are better than anyone else. It doesn't divide the world into deep thinkers and shallow thinkers. It simply reminds us that human minds aren't built from the same blueprint. Some people thrive through action, others through reflection. Some recharge in crowds, others recover in silence. Neither is more valuable. They're simply different ways of moving through the same world. And the moment you stop comparing one to the other, you stop turning difference into deficiency. Real freedom isn't finally fitting in, it's no longer needing to. It's walking into a room without wondering which parts of yourself you should hide. It's allowing your curiosity to exist without apologizing for it. It's choosing relationships where silence feels comfortable instead of awkward. It's realizing that the people who truly understand you were never looking for a louder version of you. They were waiting for the real one. So maybe you've never been too much. Maybe you've simply been paying attention in a world that rewards distraction. Maybe you've never been too quiet. Maybe you've been listening while everyone else was waiting for their turn to speak. Maybe you've never been too different. Maybe you've just been measuring yourself against standards that were never designed for the way your mind naturally works. And that's a very different story. The next time you leave a crowded room feeling mentally exhausted, or replay a conversation that everyone else has already forgotten, or choose one meaningful conversation over 10 shallow ones, don't ask yourself, "What's wrong with me?" Ask something kinder, new. It's about finally recognizing the person you've quietly been all along. And sometimes that recognition is the beginning of a life that finally feels like your own. If this video resonated with you, let me ask you one question. When was the first time you realized you experience the world differently from the people around you? Share your story in the comments. Someone reading it may discover that they've never been as alone as they thought.